Party with your host, Dustin Rybka.
Welcome to Sex Party. I'm your host, Dustin Rybka. This week, we're going to talk about some of the darkness in the world. Relax. It's not going to be that depressing. We're going to giggle and laugh our way through when possible. We're going to talk about how some of the darker things happening in the world, or just overall in general, how it affects your sex drive. Does anxiety, fear, darkness, does it make you more turned on, less turned on? Does it matter? Do you not notice? Does it depend? Here to help us sort it all out is Alicia Fay. Alicia is a sexual empowerment and relationship coach. She's brilliant. She is a fucking blast. I had a really good time with this episode. We have fun with the darkness, and you should too. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Alicia Fay.
This week's conversation.
Alicia Fay, welcome to Sex Party. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. So excited to be here. It's interesting. I was listening to your other episodes about this, like the whole like natural inclination to say like I'm fine or I'm doing great. And I was really reflecting on this today, and I was like, I'm actually not doing great, right? I mean, I'm excited to be here, and general life stuff's going well, but I probably would not be alone in recognizing the kind of emotional upheaval and turmoil that has been occurring across the globe from the events of like the last few weeks, predominantly originating in the US. But yeah, that's been a lot, to be honest, to process and move through over the last week.
Yeah, well, three things just to comment back on that. One, yes, asking how someone's doing is now on this show is like becoming a thing, especially when people ask me how I'm doing, because I never know what's gonna come out, and I just go with it. So there's that. Two, it's really a much deeper question than people realize. And three, yeah, like here in America, we're just fucking destroying everything. So
you're giving it a good go.
Yeah. Oh God, we're really trying to test the durability of democracy over here, which is just horror. Like, it's like, man, like everybody is so, and I'm a white dude. I have it the best, right? But I'm exhausted, so I can't imagine what anybody else feels like. Women, Black people. I mean, it's like it's just. It makes me sort of like, okay, I'm gonna open the laundry chute or the fucking, and just that's it, or what? You have this. You're like dragging around this like shitty feeling all the time. So and part of me is like angry about it, and part of me is like sick to my stomach about it. But
yeah, it's a real emotional, like, I was thinking about it. It's a mind fuck, but it's like an emotion. It's an emotional fuck as well, right? Like, there's a duality of emotions that occurs in situations like this, where you do get the anger and the rage, which is actually great emotion to feel because it's activating emotion. It's like, this is where you take action from. But then you get the despair, the grief, the anguish, and that's really distressing. That's really demotivating. And so I completely resonate with what you're saying in just terms of feeling it all, right? Like, there's so much there, and just allowing that to happen, because I think we feel the need to figure it out exactly how we feel, and there is this time period where you're like, just feel it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious as to so you're in London currently.
Yeah.
You're from New Zealand originally, correct?
Yes.
So being from another country, like, are you guys just over there like in the pubs, like these fucking idiots, like drinking a fucking, or like what's the how do we look over there? How bad do we look?
Not great. I won't like sugarcoat this for you.
Yeah, we don't like sugarcoating.
Yeah, I think there is like an overwhelming kind of narrative of just like incredulity, like just being incredulous about what is happening in the States, and this anger, because I think when you exist outside of the States, even if you don't want to be, you are affected by what happens in the States. It's still such a powerful force globally,
Mhm.
and so you are affected by it, you are impacted by it, but you have no control over it. Like, we don't have any voting power in the US. We can't do anything. All we are is kind of in semi like, in some ways we're victims to what occurs. Like, we don't have any kind of control. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting because people don't think of it that way. Like, oh, we must look like idiots, but I think we're kind of like used to that. But at the same time, it's like, we do have here in this country, we do have voting rights, and the majority is with, kind of the right thing to do,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
yet it's all tied up in some weird Star Wars political fucking mess. And no one's doing anything. And I think
Yeah,
that's really, really kind of the scary part, is that the worst has happened, right? But it can get so much worse.
I know.
And so
I
it was
know.
odd to see on Friday they
Mm,
shot down this 50-year precedent,
mm.
and it was just like, what?
What's
And then on Sunday everyone's at brunch, and I'm like, wait a minute, wait, guys, like, it's cool if we want to grab some fucking, Bloody Marys and whatever. We should probably hit the street. Like, no one really. So I feel like, unfortunately, I do feel like it is going to get worse, but I
Mm,
do see, I'm sort of a dark optimistic
yeah.
person. But I do see, I think the idiots are going to severely overplay their hand. And in any great Shakespearean tale, when someone overplays their hand, here comes the sword. So hopefully there's an opportunity for us to take the power back. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. I love their dark optimism. I go through bouts of feeling like that, and then I go through bouts of being like, we have this human propensity to think the worst has happened and it couldn't get any worse, and like, oh no, this wouldn't happen in this day and age, and
Right.
then that shit happens, right? And so I kind of am like, shit, what could happen next?
Yeah.
Particularly, this is setting a precedent for just looking at what else has come into effect over the last 50 years. But yeah, let's for now stick with this optimism and be like, have they like played their hand wrong? Time will
Yeah.
tell. Time will tell.
Absolutely. And in a season of Black Mirror episodes, there's always one or two that are optimistic in the end, right? There's like San Junipero or something where everyone's like,
Yeah,
"No, this isn't so bad. We're dead, but it's happy times, like whatever."
kind of
So,
nice.
yeah, there has to be some sort of dark hope at the end of this. I think, strategy, waiting for the right moment, letting them, shoot their load, no pun intended, and then coming in for the kill afterwards, like, hey, you fucked up, whatever, and then taking the power back. So hopefully,
Yeah.
well, with that to start the episode off,
Starting off with the light stuff.
no, I love it actually, because it does need to be discussed, and it's good to hit it right from the fucking front.
Yeah, it's
So
real, and
yeah.
people will die, and I think that's always really important. I
Mhm.
think we have a propensity to kind of feel uncomfortable by this shit, and so we kind of like, how do we skirt around this or pretend it's not affecting us? And it's like, this shit
Right.
is real, and people will
Yeah.
die, and it's okay to talk about it.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's totally. And in whatever way that looks like, I think people
yeah,
are scared of like talking about it in the wrong. There is no wrong way. Like, we're in the worst case
no,
scenario, so
yeah,
whatever. Let's fucking figure it
process it
out.
how you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Okay. So for the people that in the audience who do not know who you are, could you
Mhm.
introduce yourself? Talk a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm Alicia Fay. I am a sex and intimacy coach. I work with women to find their confidence within their sexuality. So this shows up in so many ways. So I work with women to destigmatize sex, to release shame, around their sexuality, to improve their access to sexual pleasure, to help them to orgasm. A lot of the work I do is working with women to understand their libido and sexual desire more, because that is just something that's rife with myths. But I predominantly just work across the board with women who are like, there's got to be something more here when it comes to sex and my sexuality, and I'm ready to do something about it. So I'm one of those people that they come to. And because sex and our sexuality ripples through all parts of our lives, whether we think it does or not, a lot of my work is around healthy relationships, intimacy, connecting with people around you, connecting with your life, right? So it's a fascinating job. I absolutely love it. And what we were talking about before, one thing that's really come up with me over the last week, with all the conversation around abortions and bodily autonomy, you can't have these conversations without seeing the sexual repression that underlies all of this, right? Because a lot of the conversation is like, women shouldn't be having sex, or they should be more careful when they're having sex, or like, abstinence and all this stuff that is just like, it just doesn't work. Like, research indicates across the board, one, abortion, getting rid of it doesn't stop abortions, it just stops safe abortions. And also, people aren't going to stop having sex. It's puritanical at its core, and a lot of my work is around like getting rid of those puritanical narratives and helping women feel safe and joyful and comfortable and confident in their sexuality. So yeah, I'm working hard at trying to stop the narratives that are coming through over the last week and how they have been for millennia.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting because it's like the whole thing about how women shouldn't have sex or shouldn't say fuck or shouldn't come or squirt or be with other women or have gangbangs or whatever the whole thing is kind of a fucking garbage parade, right? And now like we're really getting to like the major floats in the garbage parade with all of these current things.
Yeah.
So it was already really terrible. And I wanted to explore that when I started this show. And you're completely correct, and it's coming up more in these later episodes, or current episodes, I should say, that the secret is like, sex party, right? But sex, it connects everything. It's not just like about, blowing your load and getting off. It's everywhere. It's everything. It's one big umbrella. Let's explore those connections. So I'm curious, with your work, things have always sort of been shitty for women. Again, garbage parade, right? And if women are already under stress, it's hard for them to have an orgasm with a partner, maybe on their own, because of guilt, because of shame, all of this fucking bullshit. What are you seeing with the current stuff, with the last like 5 or 6 years, American craziness? Like what is that doing to people's confidence, their ability to have an orgasm and get in touch with themselves?
That's a really good question. I think it's difficult to narrow down one thing I'm seeing. I think you can see things in pockets of society, right? So for example, you live in a bubble. We all live in bubbles. We live in our social circle bubbles. And so in my social circles, things like sex positivity, sexual empowerment, these are things that are becoming more and more commonplace. I wouldn't say that they're normalized. I would say there's still a lot of stigma, and I'm a sex coach and I have conversations about sex all the time. And my friends are used to that, colleagues, etc. But there's still a lot of stigma there. But then I lived in Indiana. Oh God, that's probably like 7 or 8 years ago now.
Oh no, Indiana.
And sex just wasn't ever discussed. Like I lived in a space that was very religious. People were getting married very young, so 19, 20, because we want sex, right? And so we're curious. And there's a variety of factors why you get married young, but it was so interesting to see you can't stop sexual desire by just telling kids not to have sex. And when you're like, you can have sex when you're married, it absolutely forces them into marriage. And I talked to a variety of young people back when I lived there who were just like, I am so sexually unsatisfied. I thought it was going to be so much better than this. I don't know what's wrong. Some of the times I was figuring out that they weren't, really even understanding pleasure, weren't even understanding their bodies. Sex was very mechanical. And this is for guys as well, right? Predominantly, I think it impacts women. I think men have a high propensity to go seek information from things like porn.
Right.
And masturbation is slightly more normalized for men. But all in all, like talking to across genders, I saw significant sexual repression and how much that caused disconnect from self, lack of pleasure, and just lack of connection with partners because they couldn't go through it. I know this is a bit roundabout from what you asked, but I guess I'd be saying I haven't seen any particular themes come out. I've seen a slight increase in people being at least willing to have some conversations, but I'm also really seeing people like clutch to their purse strings, right? Clutch to what they know. And this caused them to shut out anything that's scary and different because it's uncomfortable. So I feel like I'm seeing a variety of things, and there's not one direction. It really depends on the group of people you're talking to.
Yeah, I think, in that question for me, it was like, man, if something's already stressful and then, you have like a series of elections that are just like frantic and, and there's inflation and then abortion and the fucking planet is melting and you can't find, fucking whatever, like all of that stress has to like make the stress you just felt being a woman, and not able to be really in touch with your body, like even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, then I went completely off.
No, but you gave us Indiana, so we can.
I gave you Indiana. How lucky. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. Oh my God, like sex. I always say to people, what happens outside of the bedroom, moves into the bedroom. So what happens outside of sex makes its way into sexual experiences. And I'll reflect this back at you. Like, do you feel when you don't have as much hope in the world, or you're not as optimistic, or there just feels more and more shit that's happening, do you feel more disconnected from your body, more disconnected from your pleasure, from sex and connection, etc.?
So, amazing question. For me, I think when I'm stressed out, I definitely feel detached from my body, not as in touch with things, and sort of sexually off. But I think the weird thing is for me, and maybe just because I'm a fucking nutcase, but if things are really bad, like, oh God, this is the worst. Like, I'm insanely turned on and I need to immediately figure that out, whatever that looks like. So if something's drastic, like if I knew I was going to die, like I would be like, okay, how can I have as many orgasms as possible? But if it's something like drastic,
you're going to die. You're like, please, I want as many orgasms before I leave this earth.
Yeah. Cause and again, it's going to sound insane, but we're honest here. So whatever. I've had days where I've gotten like really bad news. And the first thing I've done is like gone and masturbated, like, because it was just so bad that it's like, fuck it. Right. But if something is drip, drip, drip every day, where it's like, oh no, like they blew up the whatever building and now they're taking everyone's food away or whatever. Like it's every day. It's like, yeah. I mean, I'm with everybody else. I just want to eat fucking popcorn and not shower.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. And I think that's so important to be discussing, because everybody's response to life stimuli and life shit will be different, right? And its impact on sex, sexual pleasure, orgasms, etc., is going to be different for each person. Predominantly chronic stress and stress in general, for the overwhelming majority of people, will reduce sexual desire, right? But for a percentage of people, they actually get an increase in libido. From stress. Because when you orgasm, when you masturbate, etc., or have sex, it's a stress release, right? There's
Sure.
like a hit of endorphins and dopamine, and your body's like, gets to let it go. Uh, so like, and that was the case for me as well. I was definitely somebody who chronic, like the day-to-day, like stress, it would be like, oh my God, I need to go home and like masturbate because I just need to have a good hit of shit today because it's been a hard day. So yeah.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think, I'm someone who personally, like, my sex drive is like really strong. And even like when shit's bad, like I'm like just deviant fucking thinking constantly. I'm gross. So whatever. So it's like,
It's not
you
gross.
know,
It's perfectly normal and fine.
Sure. Well, if I could open the door to my mind and show everyone, I don't know if we'd feel that way. But yeah, no, I've always considered it like that's just who I am, and
Yeah.
and I accept that, and whatever, and
Yeah.
that's what we're doing. But I do think like over long periods of time, it can really grind down. There's nothing worse than like the slow, like, oh, now this is wrong. And now this is, it's like, oh my God. So, and that's the kind of time period we're in, where it just feels like, every day, people are like looking in I remember there was a period of time, I think it was towards the end of the last guy's presidency here in the States, and COVID was raging, and I'm not giving up the power and whatever. And every time, like, at least here in Chicago, like every time there would be like a noise or a plane in the sky, we were all like looked up, like, is this it? Like,
Yeah.
And it's not a great time to be sexual and fun, and it's like everyone, I remember when they dropped the mask mandate, I was like, I went to the grocery store, right? And everyone's like, for the first time in months, like in the grocery store, like looking at each other. I'm just like, this is so sad. This is great, but it's so sad. But so it makes it difficult to like even find like ground to stand on, right? Like I think everything is insane. I think the waves of the last couple years are gonna reverberate through sex and dating and all of the fucking stuff for a while.
Yeah, completely. That's a very good point. And I think that there comes a moment as well where you have to just release the pressure off yourself and just recognize that life has been different. So parts of your life are going to be different, right? It's been so interesting to me throughout the pandemic that people are like, oh, I'm not wanting sex as much, or like, where's my libido gone, or our sex isn't as good. I mean, for some people it was like the opposite, right? Which is great. And they were like, what the fuck is it? But I think it's so interesting to me how people are like, yeah, I just don't feel like working as much, or like I just don't want to do my hobbies, and they're all good with that. They know that when shit happens in life, things can fall apart a little bit in other parts of your life. But when it comes to sex, when it comes to our relationships, we're like flabbergasted. We're like, but this stuff is so separate from life. Like, how is this impacted by a pandemic? And you're like, of course it's impacted by a pandemic. You are not in the same situation every day that you were beforehand. So you've got to expect to some extent that that's going to ripple into the bedroom. It's going to ripple into how you feel about your body, about your sexual partner. If and I took it from your other podcast episodes, but you're not in a relationship and you weren't throughout the pandemic, I'm imagining. So that changes your ability to have sexual intimacy and just intimacy in general with people. Like, how did you fare through that?
Yeah. Me personally, I mean, it was it still is a really strange time because all of that time sort of not in a relationship, not, and I didn't like have sex with someone until almost a year through the pandemic, right? And it was like this weird anxiety ridden thing where it's like, oh God, she flew here, and airplanes, what we knew then versus what we know now is just a world of difference. So there's a lot of anxiety. But I did definitely get stuck in this sort of like place where I was really on my own, and I still am, and I can't figure out if am I making choices that I'm almost unaware of to keep myself in this sort of single bubble, or is it just the way things have? That's the question that I'm always asking myself. Like, is this sort of like the new way of like I'm gonna live my life? Because I'm great like doing this podcast and
Yeah.
like exploring other projects or whatever, but then you
Mhm.
stop and you think like, oh wait, like we haven't, like gone to dinner, let alone like hooked up with somebody, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Mhm.
it's been very strange. I'm still like, I feel like I'm really in the middle of a really strange time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so I don't know, I mean, I'm kind of like pseudo documenting it here on the podcast. It just
Yeah.
comes up, which I think is great, but it's sort of the subplot because, you
Yeah.
guys, the guests are like the
Oh,
main
I think the
attraction of the
conversations
show.
are the main attraction.
Well, I
I
mean, I
love that
guess
you bring that.
people can look at it however they want.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is people are starting to around the show. People who watch the show are starting to message me like they want more personal information, and I'm like, I'm totally cool with that. I'm totally open with that. I didn't think that was
Mm.
going to be a thing when I started,
Yeah.
but I've been like toying with the idea of doing just like solo episodes
Yeah,
and
I
all
love
of
that.
that. So we'll see what happens. But it is very weird, and I would imagine I'm not the only one who's in a really fucking wacko place, right? I'm sure
No.
you see that a lot with your coaching.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about just in general um, what your process is, how you sort of like wake people up to the idea of like, hey, it doesn't have to be this fucking, shit show.
Well, I guess the really interesting thing about my work is that because people find me, they kind of already have an inkling that this is a shit show, right? So even if they're not fully aware of it, they're thinking, okay, something's off here, and I just have a desire to know how it can be different. Uh, and so that's why, so it doesn't take much work on my part for that to happen, because I think people naturally can feel when something's off. But I really love this thing you've brought up regarding just being in this kind of limbo stage and just being like, what is this? Like, what is happening here? And the weirdness of reflecting on ourselves and really trying to dig to the truth of a matter, because I think it's very easy to go through life and go, oh, like I'm just responding to things and not look deeper. And so when you were saying that you feel like you're in this little solo bubble, does it feel like it's something you're intentionally doing? Like, are you worried it's intentional, or are you just at the moment focusing on other things in your life?
It feels like both.
Yeah.
It's because I'm very outgoing. I'm like, the fucking idiot in the bar who just goes and gets a drink and then
Yeah.
somehow like I don't like get up and like sing song. I know that's not me, right? Because I'll clear the
Yeah.
place out. I have a shitty voice, but if I just go and chill, things just start happening. I meet
Mm,
this person, I meet that person, and the next thing you know, we're at somebody's fucking 30th birthday, and
that's
I'm
so
giving a
lovely.
speech and shit, whatever. Like it's just my life has always been like that. So
Yeah.
I love that. I've never been afraid like to go and do and be myself. So
Yeah.
there's that, but I think that was sort of taken away for a long
Mm,
time. And on one hand, I love being single. I've talked about this quite a bit
yeah.
because it's like, okay, I don't need someone around, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I love my
Oh, that was
space.
me for so many years.
Yeah.
I get that.
But on the other hand, there is this sort of like nagging, gnawing feeling like
Mm,
you should probably figure out some sort of human connection because you don't have a lot right now.
yeah.
And that's there. It's getting every day that gets louder, right? And what I've found is like, and I'm trying to find a way to eloquently put this, but fuck it, like maybe that's just not going to happen. sometimes what I found these last couple years, especially lately, is at least for me, is like I almost forget like I'm a human being, right? I'm just like going and doing and going and doing and going and doing and going and doing so much so that when you accidentally walk out into the street and someone honks and it scares the shit out of you, you're like, fuck. But then afterwards, you're like, whoa, that felt fucking, or like you do like meet somebody you think is interesting or attractive or fun or whatever it may be. And you have a 5-minute conversation and then they leave and you're like, oh shit, why am I so charged up? Or like, if, I had a thing where I was like working out with a trainer and like, accidentally like cut part of my arm and there's blood and I saw blood and I was like, oh, I'm bleeding. Like, oh, I'm human. Right. So there's these, and I've noticed those things happening more. And I'm like, that's not normal, that I need to bleed to fucking feel like I'm still alive. Right.
So relatable though, right?
Yeah, sure.
I think incredibly relatable. What I would say, and it's something I think a lot of us deal with in our current modern day society, which is go, go, go and very cerebral, is that's incredibly common experience to have these moments. You're like, fuck, I'm a human and I'm alive in this moment, because we're ripped out of the cerebral reality where we're probably thinking about 50 things we need to do that day, or we're thinking about one particular thing we did in the past or one thing we need to do in the future. And it's like this shock back into the body, right? Like we shove back into our body for a certain moments, like when a car honks at us, when we almost get hit by a bus, when we're bleeding and we're like, oh shit, I'm a human in a body right now, not just a brain, like just wandering, wandering around in the air. And I'm seeing it more and more in my work, this detachment from the body and how much it's playing havoc on things like our sex life. Right? Because what I'm seeing is that people are spending 99% of their life cerebral. They're continuously picking up phones and going on 5 different apps. They're like, I'm juggling all these things. I'm focusing on all this other stuff. A lot of people have anxiety and depression nowadays, etc., and other mental health issues. And then they expect to get into sex and be able to shed all that shit and get back into their body and actually enjoy the process. And a lot of people are finding that significantly hard to do. I don't work with men, so but I have men in my life, and they say it happens to them as well. But a lot of the women I work with, one of the issues they come to me with is, I can't get out of my head during sex. I can't get out of my head. I have all these random thoughts that come in, and I hate myself for it because he's trying so hard or my partner's trying so hard, and all I can think about is, fuck, I need to hang up the washing. And so, or like, I'm wondering about the next episode of my Netflix show. And a lot of people have judgment towards themselves in that, but we've trained our system to only focus on things cerebrally and focus on like multiple things at once. So it's really difficult to shed that the way of working, and then get into the bedroom and sometimes let that go. On the other hand, there are some people who that's why they love sex, is because they can get that shock back into the body, right? It's a great situation for many people where they get to be able to feel human again. And so when you're talking about that kind of lack of human connection, it's definitely not just sex. Like, physical touch from just humans in general is so important. It's such a way to feel platonically intimate. But do you feel like that's something that you haven't been seeking as much, like over this year? You've kind of noticed yourself, you're saying, not as connected, and I imagine that means physically connected as well.
Yeah, because I do. Yeah, I felt that a lot. And because for me, it's one of these things where it's like, okay, I want to be single. I'm not interested in a relationship. Okay, so stating that, now your options have been halved immediately.
Yeah.
So what is it that I want? Okay, friends with benefits, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's look at the current roster. taken? No, question mark, question mark, question. I'm like, okay, so no one's available on that. So, so are we going to hire a sex worker? Well, I don't really want to do that. Nothing's wrong with it. I've thought about it, whatever, sure. But I'm just at the moment, not at the moment. No, thank you. So like that option's off the table. So like, am I just supposed to like walk around the streets and be like, hey, it's just, I feel like there's your options for someone who is male or female, right? Who is outgoing, maybe doesn't want a relationship, doesn't want to pay for sex. What are your options? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are like, and I think that's a huge question that nobody is even asking.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we have a scarcity mindset a lot when it comes to sex and relationships. I think it always feels like there's never enough, or maybe not always, but it often feels like there's never enough. For example, I talk to so many people who are looking for committed relationships, and their qualm is that everybody wants to be casual, right? So they would say that you have it good. They'd be like, everybody wants to have it casual. Like, doesn't just go out and like, there's going to be thousands for you, and if not millions. And so I think everybody can feel this fear of there's not enough, and or at least I can't find it, right? Other people seem to have the like, but I can't find it.
Right.
So it's interesting hearing you say that. It's not to say you're wrong, but it's when you hear it from various spectrums, you're like, okay, well, there's a lot of people out there. So is this just how we perceive a situation, or is there like, where's the truth here, and where's our self-responsibility as part of this as well?
I mean, it is 100,000% my fault. There's nothing wrong with any system or whatever, and there, or whatever. It's like definitely me for sure. But and I'm probably just being really selfish. Like I probably want my cake and to have my cake and eat it too, or whatever fucking analogy you want to pop in there. Because for me, it's like, okay, well, you have to give a little, and I know that, and I'm just probably just being an ass about it, So
probably just being an ass.
yeah, more than likely that is the issue because
by the way, for people who don't get a rib.
Yeah, I mean, and I could go out to the bar every night and see what happens and whatever. But am I doing that? No. Why? Oh, I'm exhausted. Well, figure it out, buddy.
I was just gonna ask. I'm like, so just what are you doing to make this happen and make sure that you have enough options? You're like, no, they're just not knocking on my door. Like aren't they supposed to just turn up and knock on my door?
See, exactly. Yeah. And that's really crazy because that you say that, because for two reasons. One, that's how my life used to be back when I did like club promotion and all of that. I just didn't have to do anything. I just threw the party and went and did the thing and was on stage and da 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 da. And I would have knocked on the door, people lined up at the door, multiple times a week. So that was a thing actually for a while, and that's not realistic. You know what I mean? It's just not.
You're now having to live like most of the population. Welcome to being a peasant, a sexual peasant.
Yeah. And on the other side, right, I think that to abate the guilt or the shame or whatever that is that tells me you're fucking up, man, this is all your fault that we're alone, or whatever the voices are saying, right? I'll go on a dating app and I'll scroll around and I'll be like, well, I guess the system's rigged against me. There's no connections here. Or when I do have connections on dating apps, they can just tell like this guy's a mess. Like, one interaction, they're like, see you later. So that's my life right now. And so, it's happening. That's pretty much the bubble, right?
I think it's so difficult though, isn't it? Because, I'm in a relationship now, but we've been together for 2.5 years now. But before that, I fully understand that conundrum. When I was like younger and going to clubs all the time, having casual sex was easy. And when I like got older and I didn't really want to do that so much, I wasn't going to the clubs or partying as often as I did. And I was like, okay, I want something more. Like there's a need, there's a desire here for something more. I would feel the same. I wasn't fucking going out. I wasn't like trying to meet new men. Because I was terrified. I was like, how if I meet them and they still don't want me, you know? And then, so yeah, the safety of an online dating app, glass of red wine, get a little bit of, you know, liquid courage, go on and feel like you're doing the work, feel like you're meeting people, but very, very quickly giving up on it. And like you said, reaffirming these internal beliefs of like, oh, this is just isn't worth it. Like, you know, I really prefer to meet people organically, although we're not doing anything to meet people organically. You know, so there's just these behaviors that occur that we kind of self-sabotage a lot when it comes to trying to find something that meets our needs. And I think it's awesome to recognize that and acknowledge it. And like you said, be super kind to yourself. Be compassionate and go, I'm also a human being and this shit is tough. And yes, I know that I'm sabotaging myself, but like give myself a bit of grace through this process. And so I love that. It's not about self-flagellation or self-judgment or ridicule. It's about I'm a human being and I'm just trying to do the best I can with what I have.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I just had a conversation last week with someone where they were like, well, what's going on? You know, and we were talking and what I was like, it's not a big deal. And they're like, well, no, tell me. And so I told them, right. These are sort of, they're like, oh, well, you're just in your own way. And I'm like, duh.
Yeah. You're like, tell me something I don't already know.
I don't want to hear that, you know. Of course, I'm just an asshole. Like I'm just in my own way, you know, or whatever. But it was so I can't be the only one, right? And there have been a handful recently, a handful of women who have reached out to me around the show and said like, hey, I'm with you. Like I totally get it. Like I don't want to do that, but I also don't want to suffer the consequences of not doing that. So I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I'm somewhere out to sea.
I think it's always deeper. I mean, that's the work of a coach, is always going deeper. I mean, these are all the surface level things. The behaviors are surface level, and the real juice, the real shitstorm is looking like within and going, oh, fuck, like what's the stuff here that's causing me to behave in these ways? And that's why I always think it's important to have like the compassion and the grace and because you know you're in your own fucking way. Like I love when people say this, like it's a eureka moment for you. You're like, please, I know it's me, but I just can't seem to do something differently. Yeah. And it's this real conundrum that we can have. And so, I mean, the same happens in every area of our life, which is why there's therapists and coach for everything. But it's always an invitation to go, oh, like what underlies this? You know, what do I fear here? What do I feel is going to happen? And what do I think it's going to mean about me? And just getting a little bit curious what's deeper. Even if it doesn't change your behavior, I don't think there's anything like in long-term dynamics, nothing wrong with knowing a little bit more about yourself if you're willing to look.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I would ask you when you, for the people out there that are like me on some level, right? Maybe they feel sort of lost. Where in my case, it's like I know I am this, you know, I'm just not doing the work, right? So like that's whatever, and I don't want this, I don't want that, and it's got to be whatever. So that's my fucking problem. But for people who are like that and self-aware, like I am. Or maybe they're not and they just feel lost, right? Yeah. What is like some practical advice? Like if they want to get into relationships that are better and they want to ease into it or jump in or whatever, like on any level, where do they start?
Oh, it's such a good question because it really depends on where they're starting from now and what their background is. So I'll give like general stuff.
Sure.
And obviously it's dependent on the person. And I'll probably use some of my own experience. So I was the same. I was going through these patterns of behavior for a long time, knowing it started with me. So I had to be doing something, but never really knowing what to do. That's actually how I got into the coaching space, because I was sick of my own shit. And somebody referred me to like a life coach. And I went through this group program, and I just found out more about myself, like my own limiting beliefs, my own patterns of behavior, where they were originating from, really getting to know my fear, making kind of peace with that fear and going, okay, not trying to get rid of it, but being like, how can I hold space for my fear and also make space for different behaviors? So put my fear in the back seat, put a better part of me in the front seat, and go for it. So that really helped me just become even more aware of myself, that kind of coaching program. And I think one of the modules in it was about relationships. And so I really learned a lot in that, as well as the sex module told me a lot. So it kind of sparked me to go on this journey of really getting aware with the patterns of behavior I'd got into and what I wanted to change. And one of the things I hadn't done is I hadn't gotten really clear and honest with myself on what I wanted, because for years I'd told myself I'm an independent woman. I don't want a relationship. They're going to hold me down. I'm not going to have the freedom I want. Like, I want to, have all these casual relationships, etc. And I'd convinced myself that that's what I wanted. And deep down, I was like, it was a lie, right? It was a facade. It was a protective mechanism so that I couldn't get hurt. And so I had to start really getting honest with myself. And as soon as I got honest with, yes, I want a relationship, it was like such a weight off me. So I think the first step is actually getting really honest with yourself about what you're wanting. Do you really want a casual relationship and you're trying to force yourself into a committed relationship? Or is it the opposite way around? Like, get really clear on what you want, not what you feel you should want. And then take the next step from there. So for me, it was like, okay, I want a relationship. What type of person do I want to get in a relationship with? Right? Because I was going around attracting these relationships or men that were completely opposite to what I wanted. Oh, they were fun, although a lot of it wasn't fun. But it was not aligned with actually what I told myself I wanted. So I had to get honest with myself. What type of guy I wanted. I'm bisexual, but I knew I wanted to be in a relationship with a man at this particular time of my life. So I was like, what is he like? What are his qualities, his characteristics? How does he like to spend his time? How does he treat me? Because a lot of times people think about what type of person they want, but they don't think of how do they make me feel? How do they treat me? And so they get into relationships with somebody who looks great on paper, but makes them feel shit. And so it was about, once again, just figuring out and getting clarity on me, my standards, who I was calling into my life, because it made it so much easier to then go out and meet people, because straight away I'd be like, oh, you don't meet this. Like, and it wouldn't be like, oh, you're a terrible person because you don't meet this, but you're just not for me, right? Like, you have to know your standards, because otherwise you will abandon them at the first sign of attention, right? Particularly if you're an anxious attachment style, you'll be like, oh, they like me? Oh, yay. And you'll be like, fuck the list. And you'll just run off into the sunset. And so really knowing yourself, knowing what you want, and standing by your standards and non-negotiables, I think is really a great place to start. So I did that before I even went back into dating. And then there was a foundation. The foundation was laid, and it was like, now go have fun. No, now go just meet people. Stop making it that every time you meet a guy, he's a potential relationship match, right? Like, why can't you just go and meet people and enjoy them and connect with them? And maybe, there's going to be something that has a little spark. Then have some fun, flirt with them, just get curious without attaching yourself to a certain outcome. And I think that's when you've gone on like a dating hiatus, or you've been in a relationship for a long time, or all these things, we can really make meeting people and dating a serious thing. And we've forgotten just how to appreciate connecting with another human being, particularly of the opposite sex if you're heterosexual. I think we can make it mean a lot. I mean, I went to an all-girls school, so meeting guys was like, all the hormones raging. So that's where I would, that's the kind of steps that I would say to start with, is really look in on yourself, get clear with what you want, then just start meeting people, having some fun, and every moment that you're meeting more people, learning more about yourself, right? Like, oh, like, what is this telling me about me? There's an opportunity here when we're meeting other people to meet parts of ourselves we might not have met yet. Oh, like, I got really nervous about that. What was happening there? Etc. And if you're still finding it hard, there are lots of experts out there who are supporting people. And I think we need to normalize seeking help in these spaces, because we think there's something wrong with us. Like, you should just know how to flirt properly. You should just know how to date. You should just know how to have sex, right? And it's like, these are not the things we learned how to be. We should just know how to have a healthy relationship. I'm like, fuck no, we don't know any of this shit. We're all just stumbling through the dark. So seeking help and support can just like collapse that timeline and get you there faster as well.
I mean, wow, right? Like, you said a lot, like but some amazing shit, right? We are stumbling through the dark for sure. A lot of us. And there's so many reasons why. Number one. Number two, before we dive into any of the thoughtful things that you said, can we go back to before you had a foundation and talk a little bit about when you were like meeting like the wacky fun guys? Do you have any stories you can share where you're like, oh, this guy's a fucking idiot, but it's fun, or like whatever?
I think when I say fun, I'm like, I use that word liberally. And it was an emotionally tumultuous experience. So I started off, like, I'll just give like a general background, but I started off in a serious relationship at 15, and we ended when I was 20, and then just ensued 8 years of drama, and it was really interesting going from like a really solid place, knowing somebody who loved me, knowing somebody who knew my body, and then going into this quagmire of shit, just being like, oh my God, what do I do here? I've been in a relationship for 5 years. Everybody else looks like they know what they're doing by this time in the dating scene and meeting people, and I just have no idea. So I went with what I knew, and that's what society told me. And it told me that you will get appreciation and attention through sexuality, right? Like, you are a sex object. So even though I wasn't consciously thinking that, I realize looking back now how I subconsciously led with that, because I did not know how to have other people appreciate other parts of me. I was like, okay, this is the way that I've got to meet new people is through my sexuality. And when you lead from that space, like, that's what you attract, right? You attract people who are just going to use you for your sexuality, for sex, for their own pleasure. And so that's basically what the 8 years was. I got into a situationship for that 8 years with a guy who I think one of your last guests, one of the last questions you asked her in the burn around was like, what would you say to an ex? And she's like, something like, fix your trauma, or like, deal with your trauma. And I was like, oh my God, that is the juice. That is what I would say to this person. And he was just somebody who was, I look back now, and now that I've got all the words for it, gaslighting, and I would say that, that he had these patterns of behavior, that he was very good at manipulating me into thinking he cared for me, thinking he loved me. And, as soon as I gave sex again, it would be like out the door. And I look back and I know I have responsibility there as well. But the things you do when you're attached to someone in such a toxic way, I just want to give my past self like a damn hug and be like, oh, babe, the shit we put up with from people, it's really true that it's like we often don't look at relationships and people and go, how are they treating me and how do they make me feel? We're looking at what we our the potential they might have, who we wish they were. We're sticking around for that, and rather than going, no, this person is what they do, right? It's not who you think they are, it's what they do. And so I was caught in these cycles, but predominantly this with this one guy, but he was on and off. And throughout my time with him, there was just a bunch of other guys who were the same. I would just lead with my sexuality, and even if I wasn't having sex with them right away, like I was just sexually vivacious. I was a flirt, and so they were like, "Oh yeah, I want to have the chase." And then cool, when I got what I wanted, like their desire eked out from me, and then they were on to the next thing. So when I say it was fun, I mean, yeah, sure, there were fun experiences. Don't get me wrong. Like I love sex, but yeah, it's a liberal use of it because it did feel like a shitstorm. Yeah, at the same time, I look back and I go, it taught me a lot about myself. I have a lot to work with now. I know myself deeper than if I hadn't gone through these experiences. So yeah, I mean, that's probably not the juicy details you wanted from these experiences. I could talk about people in hostels around the world and all that shit. But
No, I think that with this show, I always try to invite and then sometimes draw out or entice, right, people to be themselves to a degree where it's like, wow, where a guest can be like, shit, or, I said that, or a audience member can be like, that is so cool. Like I feel empowered or slightly better than I did because I know that, or
yeah,
there's just something about just being honest that I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
it's just like, it's the fucking ultimate power. It's the ultimate flex. No one can hurt you if you're owning. It's like, it's just fucking amazing. So
It is, right?
however someone answers my stupid questions, right, is how they answer them.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky that I have intelligent, fucking thoughtful people like yourself on the show. I know how to pick them. So,
You do. You're fucking good.
so,
It's
so when I ask a question and you answer how you answer,
mm,
it's always appreciated because I know it's going to be fucking real. Um, that
yeah,
being said, so before you had laid a foundation for
yeah.
a baseline for what you wanted dating wise, right?
Mm,
That was your experience, everything that you had just mentioned. Then you laid the foundation. I'm wondering if does it work similarly with women laying a foundation for what they want, what they need, what they desire for an orgasm? Because I think I was looking through your Instagram
mm,
um, stuff, doing
yeah.
research, and it was like one of the most profound things that I saw on there. There's a lot of profound stuff on there, by the way. It's
Oh,
fucking
thank you.
great. I encourage everyone to go look at it, and it will all be linked in the show notes. But women who have never had an orgasm or maybe haven't had a great one, right? Believing
Yeah.
that they're broken. And then also I would
Mm.
add to that, just from the other guests, like believing maybe they're asexual, right?
Yes. Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
So is there a foundation thing where you need to find what you need to not feel that way? Can you talk about that a little more in depth, feeling broken, being asexual?
Yeah.
Like,
I think people, and once again, very general comment, but I think most people who haven't had an orgasm or haven't felt significant sexual desire um, can feel broken or feel like they're asexual because we have a lot of myths in society about how these things are supposed to work. So of course we feel like there's something wrong with us because society says no, everybody can has an orgasm really easily, like just quickly, rub your clit or pinch your nipples and it's done. Or everybody feels spontaneous sexual desire, like everybody has a look with the person across the room and wants to rip their clothes off and go at it on the washing machine. And so when we see that, when we hear that, when that's just continuously fed to us in the societal narrative, predominantly through media, because we don't talk about sex, um, it makes sense to feel abnormal. It makes sense to feel like there's something wrong with us when that's not our lived reality. So yeah, the foundation. So I'll start with that first, just to
sure.
that's what I would say first to that. Did you want me to like go on and talk about the foundational parts?
Yeah, because I think the thing that I've seen throughout my life, and again, like around the show, I've had
Yeah.
so many conversations with women that are just like, no, I can't, I don't get off unless it's like with a vibrator or on my
Yeah.
own. And even then sometimes. And so
Yeah.
when you drive it that more, I'm sure that guilt and shame and all of the things, but like there's an embarrassment that comes with it. So much so that if you're with a partner that just sucks, right, and you feel shitty and they're stupid and like whatever, right, you get to a place where you're just like, I'm asexual, I'm broken, and so
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of your work is showing people like, hey, you're not
Mm.
either at all, and this is gonna feel fucking great. So I guess my question would be, how do you get them there to realize it, to practice it? What are some things they can do to start on that path to having a great fucking orgasm?
Yeah. I think an important part is to let go. It sounds like counterintuitive, but to like let go of the orgasm a little bit. I
Mm.
think there's this gripping that happens, like I must have an orgasm, otherwise there's something wrong with me. And I think when we come from that place, the pressure is not conducive to pleasure, right? You go into sex, and I'm sure you've had these experiences, like maybe when you're younger or with different people, but when you go into sex and you have so much built up like expectation and pressure, and then like you just can't do it the way you want to do it, like right, like things don't work out because of this pressure. We like orgasm and pleasure really thrives in a more relaxed environment. And although you still might be really wanting an orgasm, like it's hard to completely put it off the table. I think just starting from that space of go in with the intention to a sexual experience to like feel a lot of pleasure, potentially have an orgasm, but don't make it the be all end all of a great sexual experience, right? Allow it to like come, but also like pun intended, but but also yeah, but you just let go of the grip a little bit. So that would be what I would say in terms of like mindset. When it comes to the practical elements, I think people who have yet to orgasm, there's a lot of, and once again, really depends on the person's situation. Some people can't orgasm because of psychological blockages from like religious upbringing, for example, right? So you kind of need to work on the belief structure that you have before you work on orgasm sometimes. But that's not everybody. And in terms of the practical element, it's like, are you self-pleasuring enough, right? Self-pleasure being aka masturbation. Are you having these experiences where you're actually really getting to know your body? And I don't just mean like the wham bam thank you ma'am type of masturbation. I mean like figure out how pleasure feels across your body, because on average the female body takes 20 to 40 minutes to get to like peak arousal state, which is conducive for orgasm. And a lot of women I talk to, and I'm like, okay, like you want to orgasm, like talk me through your masturbation techniques. And they're like, I'll spend like 3 minutes rubbing my vulva or my clit, and or like putting my fingers in my vagina, and nothing seems to happen. I'm like, did you do anything before this? Like, did you try to turn your body on in any other ways? And they're like, no, I've watched porn, and she seems to orgasm within 3 minutes just with the dick inside her. And you're like, okay, porn is entertainment, not education. So let's not get our education from porn.
Right.
But there's this lack of knowledge and awareness about how our bodies work when it comes to pleasure, particularly for the female body. A lot of guys find it very easy to just like go straight to the genitals, and that's a huge turn on. But for the female body in general, it works so much better when you start from the outside and work your way in. So it's like, pulling your hair a little bit, like stroking your face, like rubbing your earlobes, stroking your neck, really just feeling what pleasure feels like across your body and paying attention to it. Just being like, wow, like, oh my God, I didn't know I liked this so much. What if I did it with this type of touch or this type of rhythm? And that's where I think a lot of people need to start, is really getting to know their pleasure system, really getting to know their body and building it up, because an orgasm is a build up. And so you're building up pleasure, you're building it up, and then you might have orgasms and you've never touched your genitals, but predominantly people orgasm from their genitals. And then it's really getting like, when you've built up the turn on, when you're like aroused and your desire is like, woof, yeah, fuck, I feel good. Then it's like, go to your genitals, have lube, right? The amount of people who don't use lube because they think there's something wrong with them by not having enough self-lubrication. I'm like, lube is there for a reason. Lube is like fucking Jesus's juice. Just follow it, but it's like
we
amazing.
Love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
And so, and really, once again, getting deeply curious about our pussy, and not, I don't mean internally, I mean like externally, because the majority of women orgasm from clitoral stimulation. And so it's like, oh my gosh, like, what does my labia feel like when I rub them? What does my clit feel like when I like circle around it? Like, because some people don't know the techniques, what to do. You don't have to directly touch your clit. You can like circle around your clit, right? Particularly when you're first touching your pussy and your clitoris. It's like circle around things. Like, don't go directly like on the clitoris because it can be incredibly sensitive. And then just follow that. Follow the pleasure. Follow, like, get curious. Like, oh, what's that? Like, what if I did this like 1% more, or like, what if I could feel 1% more pleasure with this, and then lean into that, and don't expect it to happen overnight. You're building new pleasure pathways. You're literally building new neural networks to teach your body what feels good, and that takes time and it takes practice. Like, hell yes, like practice, right? Practice,
Right.
like
Yeah.
building pleasure. And that's a great place to start. I think that's the most important place for a woman, is to feel safe and comfortable and playful with themselves. Really, really just playing in that space of deep curiosity and pleasure, and going from there. Very high level, but that's the starting point.
And do you like all of these practices, the building up, the figuring out what works, what doesn't? Do you find that then after doing that for a while, it builds sexual confidence, or is that a whole other?
I would say that sexual confidence is built from a variety of factors. But I would absolutely say one of the, once again, foundational elements is knowing your body, knowing your pleasure, like knowing how to turn yourself on. How much more empowering is that when you go into sexual experiences with others and you can be like, I know what my body likes. And then the next part is sharing it, right? And that's scary for a lot of people. Like,
Right.
Fuck, how do I tell somebody else? But we can show people. We can show people what we like. We can do it in different ways. But if we go into a sexual experience with another person and we don't even know our own body, then that's when we find it very difficult to share what we like, why we can shut down. Our body can feel like it shuts down during sex because we kind of go into this like semi-panic state, or we can get a little bit judgmental. Like, how do they not know how to make me orgasm?
Right.
How do they not know where my clit is? And I'm like, you should know where your clit is, and you should know how to show them.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an amazing point that, because everyone's kind of showing up with something different, and it's really bizarre. It's like, I got this box of like little circular things, and someone's like, no, that doesn't fit here. Get out of here. Or what? It's like, but to know yourself, and then therefore you can tell somebody
Yes.
What works and what doesn't for you, and people can reciprocate that. What an idea.
What an idea. What craziness are we talking about? I imagine that you've had people give you blowjobs or hand jobs, etc., and you're just like, what are they doing? Or like, It just doesn't quite feel right for me. But they look like they're like, yeah, this is my move. And you're like, this is supposed to work. So like have you had those experiences?
Oh yeah. For sure. And depending on the situation and who it is, and all of the bullshit that goes with it, it's like, do I want to even have that conversation of like, no, do it more like this. Like, cause now I sound like a fucking ass. Or is it just like, no, great. That's, we're done with that. Let's move on or whatever. And I've done both, I think that is the difference, with what we're talking about, is that there shouldn't really be that, oh, I'm going to offend someone,
No.
but it's a really tricky space to be in.
It's very tricky because, like we were talking about before, we have this myth that we're supposed to know what we're doing. And if we're not good in bed, there's something wrong with us, right? So any feedback that triggers us to believe that we're not a good sexual partner is a shutdown, right? Like I've had so many sexual partners where just like one little bit of feedback and they're just like, they can't go anymore because it's become such a block. And so, our society has created, unfortunately, the situation where we're not comfortable with feedback during sex. And I would also say, though, because of that, we're not comfortable giving feedback. And so some of the ways we can give feedback is not conducive to somebody feeling open to exploration. We're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, that does not feel good. Is a turn off, right? Versus like,
sure.
Like I really like, I would wonder what it would feel like if you tried this like this. Like, are you willing to give it a go? The energy between those two different things, like you're basically saying the same thing, but the person feels differently based on how you do it. I always say to clients, like, invite people into the experience with you. Like, don't shut them out. Right? You're obviously liked this person enough, even if it's just physically, to want to have physical intimacy with them, which is a vulnerable fucking thing to do, by the way. Like, we all act like it's not a big thing, sex, but I'm like, we're still getting vulnerably intimate with a person. And so you've invited them in to share your body with you. Like, let's invite them in to share your body in a way that's pleasurable for you both.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge difference maker. It's just difficult for people because nobody wants to feel awkward. And I've said it before on the show, but like nothing great happens until at least one person looks really fucking stupid. So,
right? Can we normalize sexual awkwardness? Like, sex is awkward.
Yeah.
Like, in general, of course, if you're going to have this many limbs flying around, it's going to be fucking awkward in the first place. And when you add like lack of like sexual communication confidence, that just amps up the possibility. But if we normalize that, if we were okay with that, if we were willing to laugh a little bit more during sex, I think we would, like, our sex lives would improve so like exponentially.
Yeah. They would improve and it would increase.
It would increase as well because we'd be
absolutely 1,000%. Okay, so in closing for this episode, if you could give, so if you're like, we're gonna shoot you into space, but before you leave the human race, right? I don't know where you're going, but you're being shot into space, in some form of stasis. What you could leave the human race with this bit of advice. You could leave women with this bit of advice, right? You're on the spot. We've got like 10 seconds before we blast you off. What are you going to say into the microphone to the women of Earth or people of Earth, whatever?
I was saying, like, stop outsourcing your sexual power to other people and start being empowered by your own sexuality.
Okay, so how are they outsourcing it? Because now I'm interested.
So I feel particularly with women, they outsource their sexual power because they don't get to know their own bodies, right? They get into, most women are like relying on other people to help them access sexual pleasure, to, to make them feel a certain way about their sexuality. And it's not about the other person. Like, we've grown up as girls being like, your sexuality is for others. It's a commodity. You're an object. And so my mission would be is to like help women see that you're not a sexual object. You don't have to outsource your sexual power to other people. Like, your sexuality is a deeply entrenched part of you, and like, you have the right to own it for yourself, even if you never want to share that with another person. Like, it is yours, and nobody can take that away from you.
Oh my God, I fucking love that. Because it's like that's your essence. That's your fucking superpower.
That's your fucking superpower.
Yeah.
And it's the most vilified and shamed part of a human being. So when you claim your most vilified and shamed part, you are like a fucking rebel. Like, it's a revolution. You claim all of yourself when you claim your darkest shadow. So yeah, that's why I'm incredibly passionate about it.
I love that. That's amazing. Amazing. Alicia Fay, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you? Where can people work with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not prolific across everything. My predominant space of finding me and learning how to work with me and reaching out to me is on Instagram. So you can find me at aliciafay.sex.coach. And that's the easiest way, and it's probably the way that I'll get back the fastest.
Right. Well, we'll link your Instagram just in
helpful.
case too. Thank you so much for being here. You added just a ton of fucking amazingness and value, and I can't wait to have you back if you'll come back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I loved this. It was so fun.
Yeah, for sure. We will talk very soon.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Huge thank you to my guest this week, Alicia Fay. Thank you so much for putting up with me. Thank you so much for being on the show. She's great. Go show her all of the love. If you guys are loving Sex Party, if you're appreciating these episodes, if you're digging these guests and everything that they bring, there's a couple different ways you can show that love and appreciation. You don't have to do any of this fucking bullshit, but if you do these things, I appreciate it. It does help the show grow. More guests, more bonus round fun things will come out of it. If you're listening to the show on Apple or Spotify or Google or any of those things, you can leave a rating, you can leave a review, you can subscribe to the show. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. How we doing? Good. You can like the video, you can follow the channel, you can leave a comment on YouTube. It really helps. It really, really helps. As always, I'm available to chat on Instagram. Just send me a DM. And I can't wait to see you guys back here next week.
Thanks for listening. The party continues next week. Click subscribe and let's make this a regular thing. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at SexPartyFM. Follow Dustin at Dustin Rybka.